All right, Chevra. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yoma Daf Yud Zayin. We're going to be going back to the stira between the Mishnah in Talmud and the Mishnah in Midrash regarding the location of the Lishkas Hataloim. And as we learned 2 days ago, that in Masechta Talmud, the Mishnah writes that the Lishkas Hataloim is in the northern western corner, what we are calling here the top left corner, which happens to be the area that is non-sacred in the Beis HaMoikad. In the Mishnah in Midrash, we learned that the Lishkas Hataloim is in the southern western corner, which what we are calling in the bottom left corner, which is in the Kodesh part of the Beis HaMoikad, and we are looking to make a reconciliation. In other words, yesterday, the whole daf yesterday was to point out that it's taka machlokes tanoim. And as we successfully proved, that the entire Masechta of Midrash follows generally, or especially the anonymous Mishnahs, Mishnayos, and follow the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And here we will learn that indeed we don't have to make this into a machlokes tanoim, but we successfully reconcile these two Mishnayos. And on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, the Gemara is going to go back to the Mishnah when we learned that the Kohen Gadol has the first right to offer any chelik in a korban, as well as the Kohen Gadol always has the first right to receive any portion of the korbanos. So we're going to be learning details about that. Not only does he have the right to receive a portion of korbanos, but that goes to animal korbanos, that goes to the bread korbanos. So the Kohen Gadol can receive, if he wants, as we'll learn, one of the two breads that are offered on Shavuos. The Kohen Gadol can receive a large amount of the lechem hapanim breads, but we're going to have a whole machlokes tanoim about exactly how many lechem hapanim breads can the Kohen Gadol, so to say, take before all the other kohanim make their division. And really, that's going to be linked to a machlokes that we have in Masechta Sukkah between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim as to exactly how was the lechem hapanim breads divided to begin with. Now there were groups, right? The 24 mishmaros, watches, that they actually changed guard during Shabbos Kodesh. The lechem hapanim was taken off the shulchan on Shabbos. It was divided amongst whom? So Lakula Alma, it was divided both amongst the mishmar that is incoming and with the mishmar that's outgoing. Machlokes Tanoim is it 50-50, meaning 6 and 6, 50%, 50%, or does the incoming mishmar receive a larger amount, and we'll explain why. And accordingly, we'll explain a machlokes here that we'll learn at Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis as to what is the maximum amount of the lechem hapanim breads that the Kohen Gadol may take. Chevra, let us start on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. We left off on the second line from the top of the Amid. So Nachamal in Masechta Talmud, the Mishnah writes that the Lishkas Hataloim, that the chamber in which they would keep the living lambs, from which the Kohen every morning is going to take out one lamb for the Talmud Shel Boker, the other for the Talmud Shel Beinu Arbayim. So the Mishnah writes that it is in the northern western subchamber. Mishnah Midas writes it's in the southern western chamber, says Rav Ada Bered Rabbi Yitzchak. Hi, Lishka, there is no machlokes tanoim. That's a great picture, but everyone agrees to there's one chamber. But the one chamber is not mamish in a corner, the way we have been learning until now. But what is it? It's Atsuye Mekatzia. It's a chamber that extends towards both corners. Extending towards both corners means it's not all the way in the northern western corner, doesn't touch that corner. It doesn't touch the southern western corner. It's removed both from the south a bit and it's removed from the north a bit. It's on the western side, but it goes in the southern and in the northern part of the Beis HaMoikad. However, and therefore, if someone were to enter the Beis HaMoikad from the north facing south, being that it doesn't touch the corner of the north, so he would say, it's towards the south. He would say it's in the south, and actually that is the Mishnah in Midas. The Mishnah in Midas writes it's in the southern western corner. However, if someone were to enter from Darim, now who would enter from Darim? Itmam Shvitz. Masechta Talmud is speaking about the actual avodah that the kohen would do. He would enter the chamber to get a lamb. Now, where is he entering the chamber from? He's entering it from the Azara. He's about to do the avodah. So he's entering it from the Darim, from the south. So since it doesn't touch the southern corner, it goes towards the northern side. Therefore, for him, it looks like it's in the northern western corner, which is exactly what it says in Masechta Midos. Furthermore, the Gemara says, don't think that it's somewhere in between the north and the south, not touching either corner. Another detail, Umistabra says the Gemara, the Bima'arav is the Roimis Haboy, that it was mainly in the south. Still fits the answer. It never went all the way down to the southern corner. So when someone looked at it, he would call it, if you enter from the south, he would say, it's in the north and western corner. But relative to the two sides, it was mainly in the south and less in the north. Now, why is that important? The Gemara is going to bring the following proof. Let us now focus on another one of the four chambers that are mentioned both in Talmud and in Midos. Now, in Masechta Midos, if you remember, the Mishnah, speaking about the four chambers, gave the exact location of each of the four chambers, not only by the Lishkas HaTaloim. In Masechta Talmud, the Mishnah only spoke about the location of the Lishkas HaTaloim, as it says it was in the northern western side. The Mishnah mentioned three other chambers. This is in Talmud. The Mishnah did not explicitly write where they are. What are the other three? The other three that we mentioned was, you have the lishka of the chosamos, you have the lishka of the fire, in that order, and you have the lishka of the lechem hapanim. Based on the premise, based on what we learned yesterday, that when we are going around, we go derech yamnin, because that's the rule. That means we go counterclockwise. The Mishnah in Talmud did give one location of the Lishkas HaTaloim, and then the other three, chosamos, fire, and panim. So going in the direction of counterclockwise, we're going to have another stira, a new stira. It's going to come out, it appears, that where is the chamber of the lechem hapanim? Again, there'll be a contradiction between Talmud and Midos. And let's read it inside. And all of this will be answered as long as we accept that the majority of the chamber of the Taloyim was mainly in the south, not in the corner, not all the way to the bottom, never touched the top north. It was on the side going both north and south, but it was mainly in the south. And that will answer the question. So first, let's speak out the question. We have the stira. Okay, and I can speak out the contradiction. So again, if you have pictures, that will be very helpful. But Nachamal, in Masechta Midos, it says explicitly that the chamber in which the Garmu family made the lechem upon him was in the southern eastern chamber. Southeast, again, if we're placing north in the top, southeast will be the bottom right. And we spoke about that in Midos, the beauty that both items that are used in the actual avodah, the lamb, the bread, kodesh kachim, they are actually kept in kodesh. It even fits. But they say that before the explanations, Midrash writes explicitly the lechem hapanim was in the southern eastern corner. And now let's go through, like we mentioned, what we mentioned. No, this picture is the wrong picture. What we will try to extrapolate from Midrash, from Talmud. So like this. Clearly, the Mishnah writes in Talmud explicitly the only direction that the Teleh was in the northwest, the top left. Now, if we're going counterclockwise and we're going through the seder of the following three that the Mishnah mentions in Talmud, chosamos, right, moikat, and lechem hapanim. So let's go counterclockwise. So if Teleh is in the top left, in the northwest, so then the chosamos is in the southwest, so then the fire is in the southeast, and the lechem hapanim is in the northeast. That's a contradiction. It appears from Masechta Tamid that the chamber of the Lechem upon him is northeast. In Midrash, it says it was in the southeast. That's a contradiction. And on that, what was the answer? Second to last line, Umishaninon, Amar Abhuna Berei Rav Yeshua, that Marko Chashuv Derech Yamin, that in Masechta Midrash, we are going, as we normally do, counterclockwise. And Marko Chashuv Derech Shmuel, and really in Masechta Tamid, the chamber of the panim bread is also in the southeast. The reason why, when you made the cheshbon right now, it appeared that it's in the northeast. That's because you went counterclockwise. But there's in Midrash, we don't go counterclockwise. We go clockwise, which is called in the Gemara derech shmuel. And if you go clockwise, it's going to turn out that it's in the southern eastern corner. These are the words that we have. The Gemara is going to tell you that unless we accept that the Lishkas Hataloyim was more towards the south, even when you go clockwise, you still have a problem. And let's just talk it out. That now, that the Lishkas Hataloyim, which is the only Lishka whose location is mentioned explicitly in Talmud, is primarily b'ma'arav is the Roimis, is primarily in the southern western corner. All right, even though the Mishnah writes it's in the north, but it's more in the south. Then now you'll have a good answer. How will we have a good answer? So I'm going to talk it out. So let's go again. Putting the Tleh in the southwest, and now Chevra, we are going not counterclockwise, but we are going clockwise. The next chamber that's mentioned in Masechta Talmud is where they kept the choisamis, where they kept the seals. So going clockwise, if Tleh is southwest, even though it says northwest, but if it's really southwest, so then the choisamis is northwest. The next one mentioned, clockwise, is the fire, the Beis HaMoikeh, that's northeast. And the final one, the Lechem Apanim, is going to be southeast, which is exactly what it says in Masechta Midrash. That the Panim chamber was southeast. It mamish answers the question. There is no stira. But if you're going to say that the main part of the chamber was tucked in the northwest, even if you're going to go clockwise, we still have a contradiction. And let me just speak out the problem. Because if we begin placing the Tleh, as it says, in the northwest, and let's go clockwise. So the next one to the right, we're moving with the clock, is going to be the northeast, the Chaisamis. The next one, the fire, is going to be southeast. Southeast is where it says in Midrash was the Panim chamber. The chamber Panim is going to come out, was in the southwest. Why did you have a stira? So here we sort of say we resolve two things. Number one, even though it says in Talmud that the Tolaim was in the northwest, it was really primarily in the southwest. It was more towards the south, which is great. And therefore, based on the premise that Masechta Midrash is not going derech yamin, it's going, yes, clockwise, that will take away the stira exactly where was the chamber of the Lechem Hapanim. It's going to chap that everyone is in consent that the Lechem Hapanim sub-chamber was in the southern eastern corner, Elalav Shmamina, that mainly the Ma'arav is the Roim is Havoy, indeed Shmamina. Gevaldik. And now the Gemara asks, okay, very good. Also is good and fine. We do have a rule that called Pinoi Sha'at Poina, right? Lo Yiu Ela Derech Yamin, which means Lemizracha. Guys, this rule is not only in the Beis Hamikdash. When a person gets called to the Sefer Torah, by the way, there we say go to the quickest route. But if it's equal to go to the right or to the left, you always go Derech Yamin. You always go Derech Yamin. When we take the Sefer Torah towards the Bima, we go Derech Yamin. When the person takes it back after a Volotzion, back to the Aron HaKodesh, always Derech Yamin. The way we dance around the beam is Derech Yamin. I mean, this is a klal. So the question is, why would Masechta Midrash go in the opposite direction? Which means Lemizrach. So why would the Mishnah Midrash go clockwise? It should always be counterclockwise. Answers the Gemara. When you are actually doing the avodah, like we mentioned in Talmud, it's all consistent. The Kohen is entering the chamber. He's walking there to get a Tleh. And normally, again, like when the Kohen goes on the Beis HaMikdash, whenever he went up the ramp on the Mizbeach went from south to north. When he walked up to the ramp, there are always exceptions. But the rule is, he made a right. He went to the east. That's because he's doing the avodah. Avol hache, but a Masechta midos. We're not speaking about a kohen doing the avodah. It's only chushbana ba'almahu. It's only counting. So when you're counting, it doesn't matter which way you count to. But hold on, what will be the logic behind that? I know we're not speaking about actually walking or doing. Then you got to always do it derech yamin. But counting also, why would you not stam? Why would you count counterclockwise? So I was thinking that perhaps when you count numbers, so if you go 1, 2, 3, the more you count, the farther away you get from 1. By us, Hashem is echad. If you go the opposite direction, you're getting close to God. Because still we have the guy. I just want to point out like this, that there was one other area where it appears that we also go derech smoil. And that is when we write. Lashon HaKodesh. I know that the old Goyish languages, or many Goyish languages, we go from the left to the right. But think about it, when you write Lashon HaKodesh, you're going also derech smoil. Even though every letter itself, if you think about it, the letters, when the Sefer begins writing a letter, think about writing Aleph, you're going from left to right. You're going derech yamin in the letter itself. So there is going to the right, but when you go to the next letter, you're going to the left. That's also an anomaly that has to be explained, that at least we have the words of Chazal, that when you're only cheshbening, then it doesn't matter, or maybe dafka, we go to the opposite direction. Just one final other application of this. When we light the menorah, how do we light the menorah? I know there's a machlokes about it, but we mamish go right, double right. First of all, we put the candle on the right, on the most right side of the menorah, the first night. It means we begin on the right. Not only that, the moment we go into the latter nights, where we go mahadran, then a mahadran, so we're lighting 2, 3, 4, 5, we begin lighting it on the left side, dafke, not only because it's the newest candle, but because that will afford us the possibility to go to the right. If we would have begun always on the right, then we would be going like we write, which is the exception. We don't want that exception. That's only for writing. Okay, weiter. Chaver, the Gemara is referring back to the Mishnah. Even though the Mishnah began speaking about the preparation that the Kohen does during the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim, Mishnah says that B'chlal, the Kohen Gadol, Makrev Chelik B'roish, V'noitel Chelik B'roish. So the Gemara wants to say that the Gemara is going to bring a brisa that makes one nekuda before the details, and that is as following. When the Kohen Gadol has the right to do the service before any other Kohanim, first of all, we spoke out according to most Achronim, that is true even if the lottery was already done. Can you imagine? And the Kohen was Zoiche V'goydel. He's about to do an avodah. If the Kohen Gadol, once he says, I'm doing it. Now, how much of it can he do? We'll see all of it. When he's taking a portion of a carbon, how much can he take? So the Bryce is going to differentiate between a carbon yachid and a carbon sipur. That will be the neshama of the whole sugya until the Mishnah. Then we'll learn details. And then when it's a carbon yachid, if the Kohen Gadol wants, he can take all of it. So if a yid is bringing a carbon chatos, now I know the owner doesn't eat any of the meat, but the eat is divided amongst the kohanim of the base of that mishmar. If the Kohen Gadol wants, he can take all of the meat of the chatos, all of the meat of the asham. But regarding karbanos tzibur, here we'll see he cannot take the whole. He can take either half or a little bit less than half. So let's read it inside. For example, and you know what? He can do it all. Mamish, just like he does it on Yom Kippur. Likewise, minchazu ani makriv. Now, when it comes to the hakrava, he does all of it. So similarly, when it says in the Mishnah that if he chooses, he can take first, how much? Same thing. Same thing by a carbon yachid. That oimer chatazu ani oichel. Chatazu ani oichel means if he's able to, and obviously you have to make sure there's no noise, he can eat all of it. Asham zani oichel. Now the Baraisa gives examples of a carbon sibur. So the first example is the 2 chalois that are offered on Chag HaShavuos. So here the Mishnah says, "V'noitel chalo mishnei chalos." Here you see he cannot take it all, but he can take half. Or here is going to be what we're going to have to explain: 4 or 5 breads from the lechem apanim. How do you explain 4 or 5 breads? Even if you're going to say that he takes half, what's half of 12? Should be 6. What's 4 or 5? We're going to explain that. Rabbi Yomer, always 5. Also not 6. Always 5 out of the 12. Shenemer, as it says, and this is the pasuk in Emor. V'hoisa, the pasuk in Emor is speaking about the lechem apanim. That v'hoisa li'adon uvanov, the lechem apanim is divided li'adon uvanov. What do we see clearly? That it's not like a korban yachid that Aaron can take it all. No, the Torah wants it to be divided amongst Aaron and his sons. This is a raya that by our korban sibur he gets to take 50%. I know we're going to come back. So what's the 4 or the 5? At least this explains the one of the 2 chalas. Mechzel li'adon or mechzel uvanov. End of quote. And now let's unpackage it. So asks the Gemara, Hagu for Kash. Now, what does that appear? What is the ending of the Braisa? The Braisa says, clear, these are the words of Rabbi, half and half. So the Braisa begins by saying he gets 1 challah, not less than one entire, a full 50%. So the opening of the Braisa follows Shitas Rabbi. The Amad that he says, Palga Shakal. Problem is the next clause in the Braisa that's speaking about how many breads of the lechem apanim. There were a total of 12 breads. The Mishnah, the Braisa says 4 or 5. Arba or chamesh mimaisa lechem apanim. Now, before we explain why 4, why 5, but not 6. So l'chayda that will come like the Rabbanan, and here it's understood that the Rabbanan don't accept Rebbe's shita that the Kohen Gadol gets to take a full 50%. He can take almost 50%. It has to be less than 50%. So Hassan l'Rabbanan, the Amar loy sharkol palga. And then the Braisa again quote Shitas Rebbe, Ema Seifa, Rebbe Yoimid lo'olam chamesh. So it's not going to flow. It's going to come out that the Reisha, the Seifa follow Shitas Rebbe, and the middle clause follow Shitas Rabbanan. Amar Abaya, yes, exactly. Reisha umitziyasa follow. No. Answers Abaya. I'm sorry, no. The Reisha and the middle follows the Rabbanon. What do the Rabbanon hold, my friends? That the Kohen Gadol by a korban sibur cannot take a full 50%. He has to take less than 50%. Well, that will explain the 4 and the 5 versus he cannot take 6. But why will he take one of the 2 chalois? Isn't 1 out of 2 a full 50%? The answer is yeah, because here there's no option. How would the Kohen Gadol receive less than 50%? By us breaking one of the 2 chalas, and you can give 90% of it to the Kohen Gadol, and then the other broken part, breaking apart, giving the Kohen Gadol only a piece is not respectful. Not for the challah, and not for the Kohen Gadol. Why did Rabbanan and the Prusa, the Laburach Arol Meisva to give something broken to our Kohen Gadol? So there is no option. The only option is giving 1. Okay, so now, Daf Yud Ches. Let's go with this. So the Reisha and the Metzia follows the Rabbanan that holds that the Kohen Gadol by a korban sibur cannot take a whole 50%, a little bit less. Okay, so now the question is, Umay Arba Umay Chamish. When will, like Rashi says, my means Masai. So when will he take 4? When will he take 5? So to go further, we have to share Malpeh, the following machlokes that we mentioned in the intro that we have in Masechta Sukkos. What do we have over there? We have 24 mishmaris. Every mishmar serves for an entire week. And then the next mishmar comes in. I mean, throughout the year, generally, the mishmaris will be serving 2 full weeks. Aside of, on every Yom Tov, all of the Kohanim come to the Beis HaMikdash, and they all partake in the part of the Avodah of Yom Tov that's unique to Yom Tov. It's parenthetically, even on Yom Tov falls out in the week of a given mishmar. All of the regular karbanos, like the Talmud in the morning, the Talmud in the afternoon, that's not divided amongst all of the mishmaris. That goes to the mishmar of that week, but the Yom Tov Avodah is divided amongst everyone equally. And before we get to Yom Tov, as we'll get to in a few lines, Shabbos is when they would change guard, and Shabbos was the day in which they would take off the old lechem apanim breads and put on the new ones. It was the lechem apanim breads that were already sitting on the shulchan for a week, in which first they would offer the bazichen of frankincense, which was just like its kmitza, and then we would have 12 loaves of bread. How did we divide it? So that's the machlokes between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda. And what is the machlokes? That Chachamim hold, the Chachamim hold that the division is equal. 12 loaves are divided. Each Mishmar will get 6. Now, based on that, the Chachamim hold that the Kohen Gadol, it's a Korban Sibur, never gets a full 50%. Full 50% would be 6. He can't get 6. What's less than that? 5. That's the 5. We're going to see in a moment when is the 4. But before we go further, just to make clear that Rabbi Yehuda holds that really only 10 of the 12 breads are divided. It doesn't mean the other 2 breads are God forbid, disposed of, chas v'shalom. No, he holds like this, that being that the mishmar that came in, they come in the middle of the day, they come in the middle of Shabbos, they will end up closing the doors that were opened by the outgoing mishmar. In other words, that they're going to be told to finish something that they didn't start. We'll speak more about this in Sukkah. So the logic is, since they are doing, so to say, extra work, even though next week they won't have to close the doors at the end of the day. We don't look at it that way. They're doing a part that they did not begin. They deserve extra compensation. So 2 of the 12 goes to the incoming mishmar, but we don't call that a division. It's removed from the 12. They end up with 7. I get that. But then the 10 is divided half and half. Which means, according to Rabbi Yehuda, when if you view that only 10 are being divided, so half of 10 is 5, which is what Rebbe says. Rebbe who holds you always get half, he says 5. 5 is half. But if you were to hold that you get less than 50%, then you would get 4. But let's read it inside. So li Rabbanan, that holds that nichnas noitel sheish v'yoytze noitel sheish, the incoming mishmar gets half of the lechem hapanim breads, 6. The outgoing gets half. And v'schar hagofas the losois, to get extra compensation from the lechem hapanim breads to the incoming mishmar, because they have to be compensated by the fact that they are closing the doors. Well, they're doing many things, but they're doing something that they did not start. Loi, the Rabbanan don't agree with that. So therefore, let's go mishtei mesrei by a miflag. But you want to divide the 12. We're saying that the Kohen Gadol should get half, then plus a little bit less than half. Batzir chadam mipalga is chamish shekel. That's the 5 that the Rabbanan say. Now, Rabbi Yehuda that holds that you don't divide the 12. De facto, the incoming gets 7, but we don't even view it as a division of 7 and 5. We don't view it that way. We view it as they're given 2 as a compensation, and 10 is being divided. Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar Nichnas Noitel Sheva, why do they get 7? Because Shtayim, 2 of the 7 is not from a division. It's an additional compensation. B'schar hagofas the losses, it's for them closing the doors that they did not open. And v'yoytze, the outgoing mishmar gets 5. In other words, we view it as 10 of the 12 are being divided. So chamesh me'eser boy miflag, if he would get half from what's being divided, he would get 5. And Rabbanan l'shita some that the Kohen Gadol by tzibur gets less than 50%. So batzir chadam mipalga v'shagol arba. So the lashon in the brayso that the Chachamim say that he gets 4 or 5 is another way of this brayso saying, I'm not going into the machlokes and sukkah. It could be Rabbi Yehuda, it can be Rabbi Chachamim, whichever shita you follow, he's either going to get 4 or 5. Now, by the way, what does that mean? That this is all according to Abaye, that when Rebbe says, Lo oilam chamesh, and Rebbe is the one that holds that the Kohen Gadol always gets a full 50%, just it means that the Rebbe knows that Rabbi Yehuda is correct. It's the Chachamim, the Tanach, they're not going into that debate. They're not ignoring it. They're saying 4 or 5. Rebbe argues with the Chachamim in 2 things in our brayso. Number 1, Rebbe says the Kohen Gadol by a Korban Sibur doesn't get it all, but he gets half. And he quotes that pasuk, La'arin ulavana, 50-50. He gets a full 50%. Number 2, the Rebbe tells the Chachamim, I will side with Rabbi Yehuda in the machlokes and sukkah. I know that it is 10 that's being divided. Ubemela, la'olam chamesh. Rava Amar, Rava goes even more. Not that Reisha umitziyas Rabbanan, Rava holds the entire brayso following Shitas Rebbe. And as we just mentioned, here is where Rava agrees with Abaya, that Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Now, what does that resolve? It resolves the first din in the Braisa. The first din in the Braisa regarding Tzibur, not regarding the Yachid, not Oyla, not Asham Chatas. The first din was that the Kohen Gadol gets one challah from the two challahs. Perfect. There are two challahs, no one debates that. Rebbe holds that the Kohen Gadol gets 50%, he takes one challah. Now the question is, what does it mean by arba oy chamesh? Ma'ela my arba. I get it that Rebbe follows Rabbi Yehuda, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, that holds that 10 are divided, and according to Rebbe that holds the Kohen Gadol always gets a full 50%. It should always be the first white line. Hachamish ba'ila mishkal. The Gemara says no loy kashem. And now we're adding another detail. It's good information to know. What is the other detail? What happens? Like we mentioned, when Yom Tov is on the Shabbos, then the lechem apanim breads are divided amongst all of the Kohanim. Place on the poll. More than that, what happens if Yom Tov is not on Shabbos, but the Yom Tov falls out either on that Shabbos is Erev Yom Tov falls out on Sunday, which means all of the Kohanim have to be there by Yom Tov. If Yom Tov begins on Sunday, all of the Kohanim therefore have to already be there on Shabbos. Have to be in Yerushalayim to be near to start working on Sunday. Or even if the last day of Yom Tov is Friday, but so they're working Friday. Shabbos, you can't travel. Even if Yom Tov is not on Shabbos, but it's mamash adjacent to Shabbos Kodesh, either the last day being Erev Shabbos or the first day being Sunday, then the Lechem Apanim breads also get divided amongst all of the Kohanim. But what happens if Yom Tov is one day removed from Shabbos? That means either the last day of Yom Tov was Thursday, Kohanim were able to go home, but some people stayed because they didn't want to travel Friday. Or if Yom Tov is on Monday, Rashi says. So yes, they could have gone to Yerushalayim after Shabbos, but they wanted to be there earlier. They didn't want to get stuck somewhere. So in such a case, you know what we're going to learn? That from the 12 Lechem Apanim breads, 2 breads are given to those Kohanim. Only 2. It's not divided equally amongst all the Kohanim because they didn't have to be there. But we want to acknowledge the fact that they wanted to be, they got there a day early. They stayed an extra day. So 2 is given to those groups. Now, how much do you have left? 10. Let's go weiter. We hold that Rabbi Yehuda holds that whatever 2 is going to be given to the incoming Mishmer for them closing something that they didn't open. So how much do you have left now? 8. What does Rebbe hold? You get half. Half of 8 is 4. Again, the Mishman HaMesakev is when it's one day removed of, so they were not obliged, but they opted in that. Like a Mishman HaMesakev. And now we speak it out. So again, 2 is given to those people that got a head start, or they stayed on an extra day. So you only have 10 to begin with, on top of the fact that 2 are given as a schar for the Kohanim that are closing the doors. So really, the division is only from 8. So mishmayna ba'ila miflag. And Rebbe holds that the Kohen Gadol gets to take a full 50%. So therefore, v'shakal arba, mishmar hamasakev. So yeah, you have the 2 for the schar of hagafas the losses, but that's it. But you divide the 10. So me'eser ba'ila miflag and v'shakal chamish. So therefore, Rava says the entire Braisa can follow the sheet of Rebbe. The problem is, like the Gemara, my Rebbe oimer lo oilam chamish. Didn't you just explain that when Yom Tov is one day removed from Shabbos, and you have Kohanim that are there, then they would get 2 of the 12. So there is a time where there is 4. So why does Rebbe say lo oilam chamesh when it's not true? Sometimes it's 4. So the Gemara says that's a kasha, but it's not a tiyufta. Because you can explain, just to know as a rule, kasha means that it's a good question, but it doesn't refute Rava. Rava is not refuted, because it could be that Rebbe is adding at the end that this never happened. L'olam is not a halacha. Never happened that when the Mishmarais had one day, which is all they needed to make it to Yerushalayim, they would not come a day early. Never happened. It was never needed. Like Keilu L'olam. By the way, it doesn't mean that it never ever happened. It means maybe it happened once throughout the whole Zman Bayesheni. So no, it's theoretically 4 or 5, and now L'olam the Poyel Mamish, it's 5. That could be the way you understand it. It's Taka Kasha. And with this Chevra, we will conclude, God willing, to be continued.
Rabbi, if it's all Rebbe, why would it ever say Rebbe Omar? How does that even flow? we're talking Rebbe Omar. So Rebbe's in the middle of speaking his opinion, and then it says Rebbe Omar. I don't get that.
The Rebbe is explaining himself. Mishum Rebbe Omer. We have this a few times. This is not the only time we have it. It's not a Mishnah.
There's a Baal Shem Tov like that that's brought in Hayom Yom.
That says,
when the Baal Shem Tov says, when you see water, you should say that the Baal Shem Tov says water represents brachas.
The Baal Shem Tov was talking about himself in third person. What are you asking, Rabbi Chaim?
Same question.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to Chevron. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yoma Daf Yud Ches. We're going to be starting by the Mishnah towards the top of the Amid that will continue to speak more about the preparation that the Kohen Gadol underwent during the first Mishnah that spoke about the Shivas Yamim, the 7 days of sequestration, the 2 days of Perisha. And then amongst the 7 days itself, we're going to differentiate between the first 6 and something unique that only went into effect on Erev Yom Kippurim. And we will be speaking about the concern, which is something that happened a lot more b'poil than today, is that when people slept, it was more common to have a nocturnal seminal emission. That's the whole thing we learned in the beginning of the Masechta. We don't want the Kohen Gadol to have a Re'iyas Keri on Yom Kippur, because then he will become tummy. Now, we had a backup Kohen Gadol, but we're trying to prevent from that happening. So both foods that make people sleepy will not be given to him on Erev Yom Kippur, because we did not want for the Kohen Gadol to sleep the night of Yom Kippur. And by the way, many Yidden today, if they're able to, they stay in shul, and some of them try not even to sleep, to such a inyan, not to sleep, to be awake for the whole 25 hours of Yom Kippur. Also, people that are unable to stay awake, many people don't go home, they sleep in the shul. We're not going into the dinner of how can you sleep in a shul. I know Rabbi Marlowe never went home, he would sleep in his office upstairs. But that all comes, that idea, really, the Kohen Gadol would stay up the whole night. So foods that make you sleepy, and foods, there are certain foods that they produce or they stimulate the body's production of zera. And these are foods that the Kohen Gadol also will not eat on an Erev Yom Kippur. And that's going to also link us, mamish, the same inyan regarding the Zav. So a Zav is someone who has some sort of gonorrheal discharge, some sort of hoitzoa zera. And the first of such a seminal emission, the first Re'iyah of a Zav, is going to make him only into a Balkeri. But if this person has a second one, either on the same day or on the next day, if that emission was not provoked by external stimuli, which would mean overeating, which would mean eating certain foods that are marabazera, if that was not there, then he would be real zav, because he had 2 re'iyos. And then he would have to count shivas nekiyim. And then the mikvah would only be allowed to go into a mayim chayim mikvah. If he would have 3 of such emissions, and again here the second and the third may not come about because of external stimuli, then not only will he have to have shivas nekiyim and go to a mayim chayim, but he'll have to bring the karbanos of a zav on his 8th day. So that will be the link. There also we find topics about foods that are mar bezera and a lot more. Chavra, let us start with the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah. This is again during the Shivas, right? The Shivas Yamim, the name of the Pedic during the 7 days of Perisha. Masrulay Zekenim, that they would give over to him elders. Miut of elders is 2. That means at least 2 elders. From Mizikne Bezdin, from the Sanhedrin. Why would they be there? Says the Mishnah, the Koren Lefana v'Seder Hayoim. They would teach him really all the intricacies of the Avodah, i.e., and under the Verter, they would read the Psukim in Parshas Achrei Mos, but they wouldn't just read the Chumash to him. They would read it and they would teach the oral Torah what every step means. And v'oimrim loy, Ishi Kohen Gadol. After he listened, Kra'ata b'ficha, read it with your own mouth. They would make him review it Baal Peh, but Baal Peh. Baal Peh means, the Rebbe said Baal Peh means by heart. Just to know, the Rebbe said a few times that here the English has something that we have to learn from. Because the Lashon HaKodesh Baal Peh, Peh means mouth. In English you say by heart. There's a lot of statements of the Rebbe by the 4 questions that he would ask people this in English, because he wanted them to say that they'll say it with their heart. The Rebbe once said that. Not only by heart, says Baal Peh of Oisen Wenig, aber mitten Herzen. But anyways, back over here. Kreata beficha, Here also means read it with your mouth and with your heart. When a person enunciates something, when you teach something, when you say something, you understand it better. It gives you more clarity. Why? Why should you repeat it? Because Shema Shachachta, because maybe you forgot a step. Or Shema Loy Lamadata. And the Gemara is going to jump. Oy Gevalt, can there be a Kohen Gadol that Loy Lamadata? And that's what we learned just a few daf ago, that sadly, Bisman Bayasheni, there was such a mitzvah of Kohanim Gedolim that were ignoramus, that didn't know. Right. So Atkan is every day of the 7 days. Now we're going to learn about a special detail that only was activated on Erev. Erev Yom Kippurim, Shacharis, Amidim Oisam B'Sharim Yisrael. They would already stand him in the Eastern gate, which is Shad Niknar. Umavirim Lefanav, and they would bring in front of him all of the animals that he will use on Yom Kippur. And they were parim. We're going to learn all these dinim, God willing, here in the Masechta. And the Elim and the Kavasim. It's interesting. There was another very important animal karban noise that are not mentioned, which is actually why the day is called Yom HaKippurim, Kippurim from the day of a lottery. Pur, which are the two Seidim. The Gemara is going to wear the Seidim. There were he-goats. One went Lashem, one went Lazazel. The Mishnah doesn't mention this. But the Parim and the Elam and the Kavasim, and they brought the animals, it's already like hands-on learning. So he's not just saying the words by heart. He can already identify, this animal, I'm going to do this. That animal, I'm going to do that. Kadeshi and Makir, he should recognize and he should become familiarized. Next thing, Kol Shiva Sayamin. They didn't hold back any type of food, any type of drink. But Erev Yom Kippurim. Im Chashecha will details what exactly is Im Chashecha, from what time in the PM. But whatever Im Chashecha means, they're already you can't eat a lot. Why? Because eating excessive amounts of foods makes you tired, right? The Shabbos shluff after cholent. And why do we care if we'll get tired? So Rashi says that's the word. We don't want, no, not Rashi, but the other Rishonim say that we don't want for him to sleep at all because he might have a seminal emission. Says the Gemara, we're not excited, but that's something that we can relate to. People learn and people forget. Ella Shema loy lamad. Do we appoint a kohen? I'll never learn. It says in Parshas Emor that the hakohen hagodol me'echav. End of quote. Say Chazal, hagodol me'echav means sheyehei godol me'echav. He has to be superior, greater than all of his brother kohanim in everything. B'koyach in strength, b'noyin in beauty, b'chachma and in wisdom, b'oishen and in wealth. And furthermore, that if the kohen gadol doesn't have this superiority. Now, what are we talking about? We're speaking about financial. We're speaking about oisha. They mamish have to go into. They have to make sure that the bank account number or whatever number of the kohen gadol is greater than his brethren. They have to give him from their wealth to make him the wealthiest. And the Talmud kohen hagadol me'echav gadleyu mishel echav. It's the mem. He's not only greater from, he's greater because he received from them. The Satmar Rebbe Rabbi Yoel said, well, hold on, money you can share. But what about koyach? What about noi? What about chachma? What do you do with that? So Hatega answered that whoever is wealthier, is more handsome, is stronger, and is wiser. That's the way of the world. Okay, bite it over here. So Amar Rabbi Yosef loy kasha. Indeed, Khan, the pasuk that we quoted that the Kohen Gadol was the greatest was with Mikdash Rishon. But Mikdash Rishon, a Kohen Gadol, we were not afraid that he never learned it. We were afraid that he forgot it. And sadly, our Mishnah is with Mikdash Sheni, and we just had this above about the tremendous turnover. Here, here we're saying the Amar Rab Asi. We're speaking about how Kohanim Gedolim had their office acquired through bribery. That tarkiva is trei kav. I know you think trei kav means 2 kav. No, tarkiva means 3 kav. Trei and the kav. That's the way. That's the lashon. 3 kav. Did dinari of golden dinarin. Ayale Marta bas Baisus. We learned about Marta during the Churban Bayesheni. So she married Yeshua ben Gamla. She wanted for her husband to be the Kohen Gadol. So she gave to Yanai Malka 3. Imagine kavim of golden coins. Al the oikmei Yeshua ben Gamla b'chana ravreve. Now it's not just Yeshua ben Gamla was not, God forbid, a tzeduki. He was not unworthy, but Yeshua ben Gamla had colleagues that were more worthy. And also, it just indicates that it was acquired through bribery. There's an important little tosfos, because we learn in Kedushin about the evil of Yanei HaMelech, but that Yanei HaMelech was not living at this time. It just points out that there were various Yanei HaMelechs, and obviously this was Bisman, Rabbi Shua ben Gamla. This was Bisman, Marta ben Baisus, and that's not the Yanei HaMelech that killed all Chachmei Yisrael. That Yanei HaMelech himself became the Kohen Gadol. Anyways, back over here. Erev Yom Kippurim Shachris v'chulei. Frek the Gemara. Oh, Tana, we learned in the Braisa that what animals did they bring to the Kohen Gadol? The Braisa mentions all of the animals. Af hasi'irim, also the he-goats. Question is, v'tana didon my tama litana seirim? Answers the Gemara, kivin the al chet ka'asi. The seirim come to atone for sin, to the sin of Klal Yisrael. So Chol Shodate, if he sees oy gewalt that there is sin that has to be atoned for, he's going to go into a despair. He's going to be so therefore, they didn't even bring it up. So hold on. What about the par? The par also came for his sin and for the Kohanim sins. Gemara gives a gewaldige ethical answer. Par, even the olav alecha v'kohanim, he knew every kohen. You know that's how it worked. Kohanim knew the Kohanim. He knew himself. He knew the Kohanim. Yes, he was reminded that there's going to be a korban to atone for the sin of his chevra. You know what? He, because of his knowledge of his connection to the other kohanim, he can influence them to do tshuva. I can influence myself to do tshuva, and I can aspire to inspire others to do tshuva. So yes, dear, I'm not going to despair when it's brought to my attention that there are things that have to be rectified. Because when something is brought to my attention that things are not the way they should be, but I feel like I have some power to make it better, it's a good thing for me to be aware of that. I'm not going to despair. I'm going to get to work. You know when people despair? When they know about a problem, but they don't have how, they don't know how, or they don't have how to make it better. That's not a good thing. Gaval. Since it's about Kohanim, if there's taka coin that he knows that something has to get better, he knows that coin. And therefore, you know, he has the power to prevail upon him to become better. So when you hear about a fault for which there is a solution, knowing about it is a good thing. However, Bekuli Yisrael, and the Sa'ir didn't only come for the Kohanim. The Sa'ir came for all the Yidden. Layada, you don't know all the Yidden, or at least the Kohen Gadol did not know all the Jewish people. And therefore, he would be unable to get people to better themselves. So then stop, you know about a problem without any koyach of making a solution that's very frustrating, that would actually make him despair. And Amar Ravina says about those who know each other, right, the power that one has over the other, dafke, because they know them, that's for the good and that's for the bad. That's for the good, meaning if I know you, if you know me, then you can inspire me to do tshuva. That's for the bad, is that if someone is in a position of power, and we're speaking about the policemen over there in the times of Chazal, and some of them were very intrusive in the IRS. If you have a family member that works for the IRS, stay away from them because they know you. That's the same concept. That's what people say. That if your sister's son is a dayala, means a policeman, is someone that has the power to krich into your bank account. See to it, never walk in front of him in the market. You know, out of sight, out of mind. Don't appear in front of people that have some ability to krich into your kishkas. And limal yusa, the opposite. That when we have a connection to people that are greater than us, dafka, because we're connected to them, do they have a greater ability to prevail over us? Weiter says the Mishnah, Kol Shivas Hayomim, they gave him all foods. And then the Mishnah adds that on Erev Yom Kippur, they gave him only light foods for him not to be sleepy. So now there's many more details that are not mentioned before in the Mishnah. And that goes into, again, just like we don't want him to sleep, because if he'll sleep, he might have a seminal emission. We also don't want to give him foods that are mar bezera. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda ben Kusya Omer, of something else. Here he says like this, we don't want for the Kohen Gadol in the middle of the Avodah to have to relieve his bowels. So they would feed him foods on Erev Yom Kippur that would bring him to Karav L'Shilshul. They would loosen his bowels in order for his body, so to say, to get rid of all of the waste. And that would be of help that the next day he wouldn't be busy with that activity. What would they give him? They would give him solotais ubeitzim, flour and eggs. At least in the times of Chazal, they loosen one's bowels. Kedei lemas misoy, in order for him not to need to relieve himself on Yom Kippur. Now, that is a great solution as far as preventing him having to be occupied with going to the bathroom on Yom Kippur. But now says the Gemara that Amru Loi, the Chachamim told Rabbi Yehuda, no, that's life. You do something to the body, it's good for A, but it's detrimental for B. Sulasois and beitzim, fine flour, and eggs can never be given to him because that's something that produces more zera, that the kol shein, that you should not do it. You're going to bring him to arousal. And indeed, Tanya Sumcha says in the name of Rabbi Meir, you don't give the Kohen Gadol. Now, whether this is on the entire Erev Yom Kippur, many people say this is only in the afternoon of Erev Yom Kippur, and they spoke here in code. You don't give him abi. We'll see soon what abi means. Amri la, no, loy abibi. Not even yayin love, and not even white wine. Now, the Gemara is going to take apart, enlighten these abbreviations. Loy abi, don't give him an esrik, don't give him eggs, and don't give him old wine, good wine. All of these items, they increase the body's natural production of zera. For Amri law, loy ababi, what's the additional? Loy esrik, v'loy beitzim, v'loy basar shaming, not fatty meats, and v'loy yayin yashim. And now the yesh oivnim that we had above, afloy yayin lovin, white wine, even if it's not aged, is similar to aged red wine, benegeya, it stimulates in the body the production of additional semen. Maybe it's adam lidei tuma, and we're trying to prevent tuma. So if we have to pick and choose, say the Chachamim to Rabbi Yehuda, we would rather the Kohen Gadol be more constipated and Taka have to go to the bathroom on Yom Kippur, but to keep him further away from tumas keri. More Tana Rabbanan, as we spoke out in the introduction about tumas zav. So a zav, if he has this unusual gonorrheal discharge, that as we learned in Nida Daf Lamed Dalet or Lamed Hey, it's different. The texture is different than normal zera. It leaves the body without an erection. V'chulei v'chulei. So the din is like this: that if there's one such discharge, that's called in Chazal seeing. The seeing of it means the zav saw that his body discharged this type of fluid, then he becomes tamei on the level of a balkeri. But if he sees a second re'iyah, whether it was on the same day or on the next day, then he becomes a zav. However, the second re'iyah may not have come because of an external stimuli. If there was something that we can explain, I know why he saw that type of discharge. And there are 7 things that can bring it about: excessive eating, or now it's connected. These foods that are mar bezera, he won't have a status of a zav. He'll be a balkeri, but he won't have a status of a zav. And similarly, even if the second one was not because of anything external, but the third one that's going to make him into a major zav, not only will he need the 7 clean days, but he will also have to bring the karbanos on the 8th day. He won't have to do so if it came from any external stimulus. So zav, if toilen loy, we look for reasons. Maybe he saw it because ma'achol means maybe he ate too much food. And another reason, v'chol minei machol, are types of foods that we'll speak again, and that's the connection. The abi, the ababi, the yayin lovin. If he ate those foods and then he had a seminar, then he had this type of discharge, he won't be rendered into a zav. During the shivas nikiyam of a zav, if he has another discharge, even though the discharge came because of an external stimulus, then the days that he counted will be completely wiped away, and he'll have to start that night again counting 7 days. So it was to the advantage of a zav during his shivas nikiyim not to have any more discharges. So therefore, says Elazar ben Pinchas in the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira, ein machilin oisei. Make sure during those 7 days, don't give him chag bi. Again, it's all Rashi Tevisin. V'loi gabas. V'loi kol dvarim ha'mevi'in l'dei tumo. End of quote. Now let's see what exactly are they referring to. Loi chag bi means don't give him milk. And no gevino, that's the gimel, cheese. V'loi beitza, nor an egg, nor wine. What's gabas? Loi megrisim, juice of pounded beans, right? Megris or pool, Ubaser shaman, that's the base, fatty meat. And the mem is, I'm sorry, gabam, not gabas, gabam. And the mem is murios. Murios is fish fats. And veloy called that what is that adding is la'asuye hodaton rabban, the last line in the Amid. And here another brayso that speaks about chamisha devarim. There are 5 types of foods or herbs that they naturally stimulate the body to produce more semen. Mevinas adn ledei tuma and ve'elohein hashum, garlic, daf yud ches Amid days, the hashachalayim and cress. The chalag loiglois is purslane. Today you can Google and see it. Ve'habeitzim and eggs, and gargir rocket. This is the rocket herb. And now that we speak about the rocket herb, so the Gemara quotes a pasuk. It says in Malachim, right? That one person went out to the field to gather oiros. Now oiros means lights. So what product that God created in His amazing world that the Torah refers to as lights? So Tanach made it up Meir that is the gargir. It's called the rocket herb is light. Why? So aside of what we learned above, that it stimulates the body's production of zera, it adds light, or it betters your eyesight. It makes your eyes more moist. It adds oil to your eyes. That hamoitzi gargir, if you're walking down and you find a gargir, which is obviously hefker, you can take it. So eat it, it's so healthy, it's that good. If you can't eat it, then at least imagine, just put it over your eyes. That in itself is going to add there is some medicinal benefit to your eye. Amarav Papa, that what type of gargir has such a potency? Only bigargira matzurana. Only if you have a rocket that is growing on a boundary of a field, meaning that you don't have other plants adjacent to it. It's isolated from other plantations, because when you plant something right near others, then it doesn't have as many nutrients to schlep from the ground. It loses some of its potency. But a gargir that grow, let's say in isolation, that's the gargir that it's so good, even if you can't eat it, at least put it over your eyes. Back over here, I'm speaking about foods that are marbezera. Amarav gidul amarav. Ach nesoy, if you are a guest in someone's house. Now, this whole industry of hospitality really changed a lot. We're speaking about a time that mamish, you would rent a room in someone's house. There would be a tremendous amount of a lack of privacy, and they would know exactly what's going on with you. And if you were to have a seminal emission, it would go on the beddings of the host. It would be uncomfortable. A person should prevent himself from leaving that type of shirayim. So lo yerchel beitzim, don't eat eggs. And for sure, because if you're going to sleep in a talis that the balabais uses during the day, if the guest will have a seminal emission, which was very common then at night, I'm saying it's very common because by the fact that it says in Pirkei Yavis that from the 10 miracles that happened in the Beis Hamikdash, that people learn the Mishnah, they say, what's the Nes? It never happened to them. It must be that the body was stronger then, enough that it was a common thing that people had nocturnal seminal emissions, and therefore, again, it's not comfortable for you a person is going to leave their zera on a talis that the balabas uses during the day. Weiter. Now we're learning about something that's very controversial. I'm very happy that we have very little amount of time, but let's go. A yid can only have sexual relations with a woman in a kosher marriage. And when a person is not married, or if a person travels without their wife, then they are, so to say, more subject, right, to a degree of temptation than a yid that's traveling with his wife. That's the way of the world. So we're going to speak about certain great Amoraim that when they went on a trip, they would marry a local woman for the short amount of time that they were there, and then they would right away divorce them. So it was, don't forget, this is before the Chedem de Rabbeinu Gershon. A man then was allowed to have 2 wives at the same time. This was obviously with the knowledge and consent of your current wife. If not, it's not moral. We're speaking about halacha. So Narvas then, these big tzaddikim, they didn't want to be in a place for a short amount of time out of marriage or without their wife being with them. So they would marry a local woman. So the Gemara says that Afki Mikla the Darshish, when he would travel to Darshish, probably Darshish was relatively far from where he lived. So Machris, he would announce, "Mam havya liyoyma," who would like to be my wife for the day? Whether it was for 1 day, whether it was for 2 days or 3 days. Knows while he was there, he was Kedusha, halachic Kedushin and halachic Nesuyin. And then when he would leave, he would give her a get. And similarly, we find the same thing with Rav Nachman. That Rav Nachman, Kad Nikla, when he would travel to the city called Shin L'Shechantzif, he also was machlis. He would announce, "Man havya liyamu," who would be my wife for the day? Hold on. But didn't we learn? Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov says, "Lo yisa adam isha b'medina zu v'yelech v'yisa isha b'medina acheres." A person should not have 2 wives. Again, this is at the time that you were in principle allowed to have 2 wives at the same time, but make sure that they are not living in 2 different countries, because these 2 families will not know each other, and that might lead that siblings will marry each other because they don't know they share the same father. Perhaps the children from the 2 marriages, right, will unknowingly meet each other, decide to get married, and then and therefore, and there'll be bastards all over the world. And exactly regarding this, does the Torah say in Parshas in Kedoshim, when the Torah says, "Al techalal es bitcha lahasnoisa, v'leisizne haaretz," make sure that your daughter doesn't become, God forbid, involved in zunus. And why? So the pasuk ends, "Umalo haaretz zima." Umalo haaretz zima means is that when people don't know who their fathers are, God forbid, children, then they might end up marrying each other. They don't know where they come from. So how can they marry? How can Rav and Rav Nachman do that? So the Gemara answers, yeah, that's by an average person. But Rabbanan, no, kol islahu. If Rav had this very short marriage, and indeed his wife got pregnant and had a child, she would tell the child, "You are the son or the daughter of Rav." The children will know who their father is. So there's never going to be a chashash that there's going to be a ach is going to marry an achoisei. Says the Gemara, right? Ve'ha Amar. Aiva Amar Rava, another problem that tiva'ua lihi nasa even a spicer, that whenever a person proposes a marriage, guys, this is a very important halacha. If a man says to a woman, "Will you marry me?" and she, even a spice, she accepts. So you have to right away wait at least 7 days, because you have to have Shivas Nikiyim. Why do you have to have Shivas Nikiyim? Because there's something that Allah calls as Dam Chimud. Dam Chimud means is that when a woman is not yet married and she's looking forward to getting married, it's possible that her desire to marry that man will bring about a little bit of blood leaving her uterus, called desire blood, Dam Chimud, which will make her tummy. Now, we don't say that this will continuously flow, but that comes about when you're going from not getting married to, "Oh, I'm going to get married," and that date, there can be a Dam Chimud, and you have to have Shivas Nikiyim. So the problem is, how did Rav come to this location, to Darshish, and marry a woman right away? He was not even there for 7 days. He married and he divorced her the next day when he left, or whenever he left. What about the Shivas Nikiyim? Answers the Gemara that Rabbanan oiduye have a moideluhu migdam have a magdemei, that they wouldn't just arrive when Rav would get there. He wouldn't announce on the day that he got to Darshish who would want to marry me for the day. Before he would travel, he would send a messenger in advance to make such a shidduch. Umashadre shlucha. So the woman that consented to marry Rav knew about that she's going to be married to him for a short amount of time, at least a week prior to his arrival, and she did the Shivas Nikiyim and going to the mikvah. Now this is very interesting, that they didn't actually have relations with them. So this resolves both the issue of she needs to have Shivas Nikiyim. This resolves the issue of maybe ach noisa achoisoi. It was only Yehuda hava meyachdaluhu, that Rav and Rav Nachman, it was not to be married. It was not to be married in a way where you are permitted to have relations. It was just to have a wife. And how did that help them? Again, their kavanah was they wanted to remove himself from the slightest degree of temptation. So when a man is married to a woman, even if he's not allowed to have relations with her right now because she still needs to have Shivas Nikiyim, the fact that you are married and your wife is here, it's automatically removes you from even a temptation to misbehave. And because of the rule, Fisha Eina Doima, you can't compare Misha Yesh like Pas Basali, someone who has bread in the basket, which means someone who's married, even if he can't be with his wife right now, Lemisha Ein like Pas Basali, with the whole huge toisus over here with details. Hold on, not so simple. We know that if a person marries a woman nowadays, in order for a man to be allowed to have yichud with his wife who's a nida, there are two preconditions. Number one is that he was already with her once. And number two, that she will become permitted to him. So, and which is why if there's a chupas nida, you can't have yichud. It's very difficult, so to say. So all of that has to be resolved. Bottom line is that being that it was not a marriage to be consummated, that does indeed resolve the two questions. I'm going to just shut the camera that got disconnected from my machine. I'm coming right back.
Shkoyach.
Many great Moroccan tzaddikim would do the same thing.
How did I lose this?
Thank you for that, Danny.
I'll never be a Moroccan Siddiqui.
All right, guys, I lost this stuff for some reason. The second one.
The whole one?
I lost the second. Maybe God did not want people to hear it, but the Zoom heard it. But I'll have to do it again. So
The whole daf you have to redo.
Huh?
The whole daf?
I'm going to find it right now. Guys, I got a daven.